Tropical forests are critical to the mitigation of climate change. In response, a variety of programs and projects have been attempting to support sustainable forest management. All kinds of organizations have supported these efforts: governments, development agencies, civil society, even the private sector. Even more investments in this sector seem likely following the Paris Agreement and the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals. What do we know about the effectiveness and impact of these projects and programs? One starting point is to look at the variety of evaluations that have already been carried out. To explore these topics, an international learning event was arranged in Oslo, Norway. The purpose was to explore the lessons from the evaluations of international forest initiatives and to discuss how these evaluations can help shape and strengthen future investments. Key questions included: have these evaluations actually been useful, and what can be done to make them even more useful in the future?
How can good evidence translate into good action? And that's really the question that we as an evaluation community need to be asking every time we are asked to do an evaluation. What is that last mile that can help to bridge the gap between the evidence that we produce and the action that we desire from either policymakers or decision makers or program managers?
I think we should look more on evaluation as a helping instrument for doing things better, not as a auditing system, but it's actually very important to think of it and look at it as an integrated part of policy making.
Before we actually start an evaluation, maybe it would be interesting for us to ask policymakers what it is they're looking for, what type of information, and what the format they prefer it to be delivered. So I would actually engage the policymakers in the outset on the process that we are actually thinking about, the evaluation questions, the issues we're going to look at.
There's an accountability function and then there's a learning function. And there's always this effort to try to assure a balancing of those scales so that we not only tell funders and managers how they're doing, but we also try to provide some useful suggestions going forward.
No one really likes to be evaluated even if they say so. It's a painful process. On the other hand, when you actually get the results, after some dialogue, it's usually extremely important.
The overall and most important element in the theory of change for ending deforestation is to change the incentive structure leading to deforestation.
Are we acknowledging that the private sector is actually quite a diverse group? So we're not really talking about companies, we're talking about investors that per se are extremely different as well. Some are more impact investor oriented, others are not. You have pension funds, you have... So are we understanding that diversity when we talk about engaging the private sector?
One of the challenges, of course, is the time frame. So these environmental changes take a long time, for example. And trouble is that often, evaluations are conducted at the end of the project.
We need to promote an evaluation culture. So we need to engage decision makers more and more, not just at the end of the evaluation when we deliver a report, but I think we need to make sure that there is consideration of evaluation findings and conclusions and recommendations at the design stage. Previous evaluations need to be used and referred to constantly in designing our programs.
Evaluations just see if you get results out of some money. I would like to know if our assumptions are right. Is it true that we can incentivize governments by support to change, for instance, their deforestation policies and so on?
I think as a community, we need to move a bit faster.
Policymakers tend to use the means that they already know, the channel they're familiar with. There is a role for evaluation and evaluators also to point in the different directions.
As an evaluator, I find working in a team of policymakers is very interesting because you can actually learn, their thought process, what's important, how the money gets spent. And so when you're designing your evaluation or indeed any other kind of analysis, you can take that into account and try and influence it right from the beginning.
The participants agreed that it would be essential to continue exchanging lessons on this emerging field of forest evaluation linked to climate change. Initially, this will happen through the Earth Eval network at the Global Environment Facility's Independent Evaluation Unit.